Joining us now, Eddie Yeranian, our man in the Middle East. Eddie Yeranian, a longtime veteran CBS radio correspondent, also been many years with America's VOA, Voice of America, and the John Fredericks Show, Man in the Middle East. Been with us 9 years. Ed, great to have you, buddy.
Thank you, John.
So let's get, we're going to go Middle East and then move east from there. Middle East to east. Let's start with the Iranian situation. Look, the Iranians saying we're just going to stockpile more uranium, and you guys aren't abiding by the accord, so either are we. Now the president, though, stood down. No bombing of Iran's missile sites or doing what Tom Cotton wants. So there's kind of a standoff now. What happens?
Well, if it remains a standoff, it becomes an economic crisis for Iran that Iran has to deal with. And I think that Ayatollah Khamenei is worried, the supreme leader, that his theocratic system is in trouble if it becomes purely an economic issue. So while the economy deteriorates, Iran is unable to sell large quantities of oil to its traditional partners. At the same time, the military wing, the Revolutionary Guard, has been trying to pepper the region with small crises that might cause a spark and an eruption eventually. Just today, Iranian drones coming from Yemen, the Houthis, they put their insignia on them. They hit the airport in Abha. It's the third time they've done that in the last month. The Saudis said that 9 civilians were injured in the parking lot. Last time around, they hit the McDonald's restaurant at the airport. About a month ago, they hit a pumping station on the pipeline to the Red Sea, the Yanbo pipeline. So they're hitting a lot of little things that we don't really follow too closely in the media, in America, that is. And one of them could eventually set off a spark. The irony is, of course, that Iranian officials are saying that the U.S. doesn't want to negotiate. And there's a video that their own press TV put on Twitter that shows Ayatollah Khamenei saying to the Japanese prime minister that he doesn't think that President Trump's message is worth accepting or that President Trump isn't worth negotiating with. So, you know, who doesn't want to negotiate?
So, Edward, let me ask you this. I mean, everybody knows that the economy in Iran is sinking. They have a shortage of water, youth unemployment 13%. There's inflation there. They got some real problems based on these sanctions. But let me ask you this. These little attacks, a hole blown in a tanker, blowing up a McDonald's, what's the purpose when you say they want to spark something? Spark what? Who's doing it? I couldn't imagine that this is coming from Central Command in Tehran. So who's doing it, and what is the ultimate goal that they have with these little attacks? I mean, when I say little, look, people are dying, so they're not little. I don't mean to belittle it. With these attacks they're doing that should act as a spark, what are they trying to accomplish, you think? What do they want to have happen?
That's anyone's guess. I don't think they're all on the same wavelength anyway. I think Ayatollah Khamenei has just given out a vague order to be tough, and that his top commander in the field, that's General Qasem Soleimani, who has worked with the Shiite militias in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq, has just been, he's negotiated with us many times. I mean, our officials know him. I mean, he's not someone we haven't dealt with. But the anger, I don't think, is necessarily from his level. I think he's taking those orders from Ayatollah Khamenei. And in a religious theocracy like Iran, it's the top that gives the orders, and people down below follow them because he's their religious leader. It's a much stronger command structure than we have in the United States. I mean, people in the military will follow President Trump's order, but not for religious reasons. And Ayatollah Khamenei is an old man. I mean, he's at least 80 years old. That's what they say officially. I think he's older than that, probably. and he hates the United States. He was imprisoned under the Shah. He blames the U.S. for training the Savak, the secret police, which tortured him while he was in prison. He blames the U.S. for a number of attacks on him when he was president of Iran back in the 1980s that killed a few Iranian leaders. He was wounded. His hand, as many Iranian analysts point out, one of his hands is limp because of one of those explosions. So he hates the United States. But I suspect that he will not be living another 10 years, and we're going to be dealing with Iranian political leaders eventually who are not on the same wavelength and probably would be willing to negotiate with the U.S. and would be willing to cut a deal that everyone finds acceptable.
What is the president's next step here? What he said is, look, I want de-escalation. I don't want Iran to have a nuclear bomb, right? I mean, he's almost said the same thing to North Korea. He wants them to denuclearize. I don't think they're ever going to do it, regardless of how many times he goes over there and shakes hands with him. I don't think they're ever going to do that. Worth a shot, but remote. But what he's told Iran is, look, stop trying to get a bomb and things will get better. At some point, don't they have to balance economics with reality?
Well, I think they do. What a lot of Iranian analysts have pointed out to me is that their strategy, which is these minor attacks, it failed in the 1980s when they suddenly started attacking oil tankers in the Gulf. That's when the United Nations Security Council voted against Iran. That's about when Ayatollah Khomeini, who was the leader at the time, was forced, in his own words, to swallow the poison and to sign a peace deal with Saddam Hussein, with Iraq. Mm-hmm. So if they go too far and bomb oil tankers and get everyone angry at them, they've already got a lot of people angry at them from those attacks on the oil tankers. They've got the countries that were involved with those tankers, the Taiwanese, the Japanese. Right. They've got the Saudis, the United Arab Emirates. So they've got a lot of the Norwegians who owned one of the oil tankers. They've got a lot of countries angry at them right now, and I don't know. They're very, very proud people. They don't like to cave, and if they keep persisting, and Trump doesn't respond, that is to say, take it to the next level, that means they're the ones who are in trouble, both economically and politically.
Well, they're a 1,000-year civilization, and they have maintained and found a way to survive through all of this since certainly they took the hostages, and that's going to continue on. So war with them is folly. I don't think we're going to do that. I think the president understands he's not going to get us involved in another Middle East quagmire where we're going to be there for another 50 years or whatever it is what's going on in Afghanistan. Speaking of Afghanistan, Eddie, another bombing there by the Taliban. How do you negotiate with people that blow up children? I mean, how do you sit with a table with these people? And is there any end in sight there?
Well, John, I think ultimately you have to go, and this is what the media doesn't want to do, and you have to ask yourself why at some point. They don't want to finger the countries that are supporting these terrorists. And I don't mean just the Taliban. I mean all the other ones that are out there, the Al-Qaeda, Daesh, Islamic State, Ansar Sharia. Everywhere here in North Africa you have terrorist groups that are supported by a number of countries, and we know who those countries are. They're out there. They've been identified, and they're still doing it. And the media doesn't want to attack them. I mean, let's take the easiest target: Turkey. President Trump knows that Turkey is supporting Islamic terrorists. He knows that. In fact, he snubbed Mr. Erdogan at the Osaka summit. He was standing right between Mohammed bin Salman and President Erdogan, and he refused to talk to Erdogan. He was very chummy with Mohammed bin Salman. Now, I know a lot of people don't like Mohammed bin Salman, but Mohammed bin Salman is not the one who's supporting Islamic State or Al-Qaeda or any of these other ugly terrorist groups. Just yesterday, the Libyan military spokesman accused Turkey of supporting terrorists in not just his own country, in Libya, but terrorists in Sudan and in Tunisia. And, it's not just the terrorism either. I mean, they're trying to resurrect the Muslim Brotherhood in at least 3 different countries in order to set up some sort of a political alliance across the Middle East. Now, while that may be a little bit more palatable than supporting terrorists, I mean, he's quite clearly supporting terrorists. His own media pointed it out before he started jailing Turkish journalists.
So you would put Turkey as culprit number 1. Who would be number 2, 3, 4?
I don't really like doing this, but I mean, Qatar is supporting terrorists all out there, at least financially, even if they're not necessarily supporting them on the ground. The Saudis used to do it. In fact, I did a story on it when Prince Bandar was fired. Prince Bandar was fired because he was supporting terrorist groups in Syria. That's why King Abdullah fired him. I read a story to that effect, and we had some Saudi analysts, people taking money from Saudi Arabia at the time who criticized it and got my story yanked. But anyway, they're not doing it anymore, at least not at that level. And one of the reasons you have this conflict in the Gulf between Saudi Arabia and Qatar is because Qatar was asked in 2014 to please stop supporting a number of these groups that people find unpalatable. Let's not call them terrorist groups because everyone has his own definition of terrorist groups, but everyone at least finds them very unpalatable. And who supports Qatar? The British. The British support Qatar. And they're one of the countries that are heavily involved in the north of Syria with these terrorist groups hiding behind Turkey. So you got 3 countries right there.
So what's in this for the Brits?
I really don't know. I can't tell you. You just have to follow the trail. Who was involved in Qatar? Qatar was a British colony. Back in the 90s when King Hamid, Sheikh Hamid overthrew his father, Sheikh Khalifa, I asked a British colleague who had been in the Middle East for 50 years, who runs Qatar? And he said, a Scotsman. Well, it took me 30 years to think about that. But what he meant was British intelligence runs Qatar. And I think they still do.
A Scotsman. So British intel, what is that? What is that called there?
MI6, I guess, MI6.
MI6. So MI6, a Scotsman runs Qatar. You know what? Look, it could be. I'm going to check into this. The next time I'm in the Middle East, I'm going to start looking for Scotsmen running around there. Could be. Eddie, we're out of time. Always great to have you on, man. Love having you on. Great perspective. Thank you. Eddie Yeranian, live, Cairo, Egypt, our man in the Middle East. Ed, thanks for being with us. John Fredericks Radio Network. We'll be right back. Stay with us.